The Select Congressional Committee investigating the January 6th Capitol attack today heard from the closest witness to former President Donald Trump yet, his son-in-law, Jared Kushner. Representative Zoe Lofgren, a Democrat from California, is a member of that committee, and I spoke with her a short time ago. Congresswoman Lofgren, thank you very much for joining us. The January 6th committee today heard from Jared Kushner. What can you tell us about what he had to say to the committee, or maybe equally important, what he didn't say?
Well, as you know, Judy, it's the policy of the committee not to discuss the testimony of the witnesses without a vote of the committee, which has not occurred. So I'm sorry, I can't get into that with you.
Does his testimony, in your view, help the committee reach its goal, which is understanding what happened on January the 6th of last year?
Well, as you know, we have heard from hundreds of witnesses, some very close to the former president, some in his closest inner circle, others not as close, and we're piecing together the information. As you're aware, there have been some high-profile individuals who've refused to testify, which is wrong. But we're going to great lengths to put together the facts, and then we'll be able to lay it out to the American people.
Well, speaking of phone calls, now that we know that there was almost an 8-hour gap in the official phone records provided to the committee from what was going on inside the Trump White House on January the 6th, and now we learn the president made at least one phone call during that time to Utah Senator Mike Lee. How does that change the work of the committee and what you have to do now?
Well, we know from public reporting that there were many phone calls made during that time frame. For example, it's been publicly reported and certainly not denied that Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy spoke to the former president in that time frame, along with many others. So we know that phone calls were made. They should have been recorded on the log. They were not. And so we intend to find out what calls were made and piece together the truth. It's very disappointing that the laws that require these logs were not followed in this case.
Well, we know the committee's mission is not to pursue a criminal investigation, but does the fact that you're not getting the whole picture from the records being provided change materially the work the committee has to do?
Well, there are other ways to find out what phone calls were made, and we're doing our best to do that. As I say, life would be easier for the committee if every person who was asked to give us information did so readily as the law requires. That hasn't always occurred. It would be easier for the committee if the former president had fully complied with the Presidential Records Act, which unfortunately has apparently not occurred as well. But we'll piece together, it's our intent to find out everything about this whole situation and report it to the American public, and so everyone can understand the threat that we posed, and I would say still face, to our democratic republic.
Congresswoman Lofgren, you were a young staffer in the office of then Congressman Don Edwards, a member of the House Judiciary Committee, during the time of Watergate, when there were impeachment proceedings against President Richard Nixon. One of the things you were dealing with was an 18.5-minute gap in the audio recording in the Oval Office. How do you compare the gap you're dealing with now with what happened back then?
I'll just say that what has unfolded here, I think, is more serious than the threat that was posed by Watergate to our country.
And why do you say that?
Well, I think the threat to the democratic republic was far more serious than in the case of Watergate. Just my opinion.
Well, and let me ask you in connection with that. We interviewed on the NewsHour just a few days ago Congressman Adam Schiff, who's on the January 6th committee with you. He made a point of saying that the Justice Department now needs to move, in his words, with alacrity to pursue investigations against those for whom criminal referrals have been voted out of Congress. Do you share the concern that he expressed that he's worried that Justice and the Attorney General may be worried about wading into controversy rather than pursuing an investigation?
Well, the truth is, we don't know what the Department of Justice is doing, and it's really not the regular order for the Department of Justice to report to us. That's not the way they're supposed to act. However, we did refer the Mark Meadows matter to the DOJ for prosecution. We didn't do it lightly, and the former chief of staff has taken the position, and there is no authority for this in the case law, that he didn't have to come in and answer the questions. Now, if there's a privilege that he wants to assert, he can come in and assert that privilege. And there may be some cases where that privilege would be warranted, but clearly in cases where he has already talked about matters, he's waived the privilege. When he was talking to state legislators, not the former president, that wasn't privileged. So it's what he has done is completely lawless. And I just don't understand what is taking the Department of Justice so long to actually take some action relative to this. It's, you know, hopefully they're doing some work. We certainly are.
And is there any way of conveying that to the Justice Department other than speaking out as you are right now in public?
No, I mean, they have to make their own decisions. I understand that. They cannot and should not take orders from the legislative branch. But in this case, Congress, and by extension, the American people, are the victim of misconduct on the part of Mr. Meadows. And so we have stature as the victim of this crime to complain, and we are.
Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren, who is a member of the House Select Committee on January 6th, thank you very much.
Thank you. Take care.